A few definitions are in order before we get started so that we are all on the same page in understanding exactly what some of these terms mean. First of all, I'm a medical case manager. A lot of people here in Israel don't know what that is. Medical case manager is hired to do one or several things by a client or their family to usually in the geriatric field, not always, where people need assistance in managing their medical lives, and along with that, the financial aspects of their lives, and also navigating the day-to-day, not just care, but dilemmas that will pop up along the way, dealing with elderly people, with financial issues, medical issues, poses a lot of ethical dilemmas. And a lot of things are not clear. They're not things you can learn in a classroom. And the first case we're going to talk about is actually a case that two Rebbeim refused to paskin because it was just so difficult. I'm going to present, I have 4 cases to present. I honestly don't think we're going to get through them all because of the time limitations. So we'll probably get through 2 of them. And we'll go from there. We'll just see how it plays out. What I'd like to say is I'm going to give you the case. I'll tell you the background, and then I'm going to throw it out there to you and say, I'm not going to tell you what I did, how to resolve it. I want to hear from you, audience participation here, on how you would resolve this situation. And then Rabbi O will come in at the end of it, and he will give his opinion in terms of how this should have been resolved. So the reason we're keeping him last is because in his wisdom, we don't want him to influence any of us. We want our own creative juices to flow first, and then let him come in and clean it all up. So I want to keep it to just a few minutes in introducing each case. But before we get to that, a definition of what mild cognitively impaired means is this. There is a test. There are several tests actually, but I'm going to focus on one called the MMSE, which stands for Mini Mental State Examination. It is a test to determine cognitive ability, cognitive competence. It is usually given when a person is about to enter some kind of legal arena, whether in executing a will or assigning durable powers of attorney, or any kind of contract where the parties involved want to make sure that nobody can come back later and say, hey, there's a problem here because the person wasn't playing with the full deck, they didn't have their mental faculties about them, they didn't know what they're doing, and therefore the contract's invalid. So I strongly suggest to anybody that if you're going to execute a document, if you're over the age of 65, you should really be doing that. Here in Israel, attorneys will not execute any legal document such as a will or powers of attorney unless the client has taken a mental competency test. And the most common one is the MMSE. So by the way, there's another name for it. It's also called the Fulstein test because 2 of the 3 people who came with the test were named Fulstein. The test is judged on a scale of 1 to 30. Questions are asked or exercises are assigned that has a time limit to them, and depending on how that person responds, they get a certain score. The higher the score, the more mentally competent they are. The lower the score, obviously, the less mentally competent they are. To give you some reference points, 24 to 30 on that scale, the person is considered normal. They can do everything. They can execute any kind of legal document. 19 to 23 is considered mild cognitive impairment, and that is the group of people we're going to be talking about tonight, okay, in the cases I'm going to be presenting to you. This is the most complicated area to be operating as a medical case manager because they are still, from a legal standpoint, mentally competent, but they can be very dangerous. And so the decisions that are made and the complications that can result. They're also an area that, depending on many factors, means that they can slide down that scale very quickly based on medications, stress, a remarkable health event, anything. A lot of things can throw that off. Then we get down to 10 to 18, which is definitely moderately impaired. Anybody walking to court with a legal document is probably, the document's going to be declared invalid, most likely. Anything 9 or less, severely impaired. Definitely not legally competent to be doing anything. Now, what's the legal status of the MMSE score? It will depend on the venue where this would be challenged. Judges have a lot of leeway as to whether or not to accept it. I can tell you that there is some subjectivity to these tests. As much as they have tried to filter out all the competing things that could impact that test, such as, I'll give you an example. If the test is not being administered in the language, the mother tongue of that person, it can have an impact. One of the most common problems is if the person's hearing impaired. They didn't hear the question, so they answer it appropriately. That can impact the score, and that's not fair. They just simply didn't hear it because of a hearing. A hearing impairment does not mean you're mentally incompetent. It could be, what time did they take their medications that morning? You know, for me, if I don't have my 2 cups of coffee, I'm definitely, mentally impaired until those 2 cups of coffee kick in. So it always, all these different things will factor in. The time of day, did they just get up or have they been up for a few hours? All these things, the environment, was there a lot of noise in the background? A lot of things can impact the scoring of the test. Sometimes it's best to, administer 2 of these. I had a client just recently, give you an example. On a Friday, she was scored at 29 out of 30. The next Tuesday, literally just a few days later, by another person doing the examination, she's at 27 out of 30. Now that's not a big jump. She's still mentally competent, okay? But if the first one was at 27, the second one would have been at 24, we're on the line. So, okay, I don't want to belabor the point on the scoring, but I'll give you an idea. And one other thing I want to say before we get into the cases is to make very clear that mild cognitive impairment or dementia, any kind of dementia, is not the same as Alzheimer's. A lot of people mix up the two. They are not the same. Alzheimer's is a disease, it's a very specific disease. Dementia is really an umbrella term, which defines a group of symptoms, and there's it varies. The levels of dementia can vary, and it usually starts kicking in around age 60 and keeps going from there, but it's not to be confused, okay? The MMSE is not for people with Alzheimer's. It's for people who are starting to experience some forms of dementia or not, but we just want to see where they're holding. And what's really nice about the test is we can use it as time goes on to see how the person, if they're holding stable or if they're starting to degenerate. Okay. All right. So are there any questions on any of that before we get started with the first case? Good. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question. Is it also that the person could be technologically challenged, that they can't answer the question? I don't know how the questions are asked.
No, there's no technology involved in these. I don't want to go into all the questions because we won't have time for it, but just to give you an example. One could be draw a picture of a clock, okay? Now, that is a good example because if the person has arthritis, they're not going to be able to draw it very well. If they, again, language, one of the questions is to spell the word world backwards or to count from 100 backwards in sevens. And they only have so many seconds to do that. So there are certain, like I said, there are certain things could impact that, but there's no technology involved. No. Good question. Okay, let's get to the first case because I'm very mindful of the time here. We've already spent 15 minutes. Okay. We had a situation, I'm obviously making up names because my work is very laden with confidentiality with my clients. So I'm very cognizant of that. So we're gonna call this lady Susie, okay? Keep it simple. And Susie is a woman who has scored on her MCI. She has scored in the mild cognitive area. So she's still mentally competent, but her judgment does have some compromise. And it was exhibited in a family disagreement that could have been very, I'm not going to use the word tragic, but very, very hurtful and expensive and a lot of other things to family members. So what happened? Susie has a daughter whose son's going to have a bar mitzvah. He's been training for his bar mitzvah parsha and for a year. And then somewhere along this line, Susie's best friend's granddaughter is getting married. And it happens to be on the same weekend as the bar mitzvah. And there are two different venues, two different parts of the country, the United States. And she can't be in both places. And she has promised her daughter, her best friend all along, she would be at her granddaughter's wedding, not foreseeing that the bar mitzvah is going to be the same weekend. Nobody could foresee this. So she tells her daughter, 8 months into this, that she wants her to change her son's bar mitzvah date. Change the parsha, change everything. And the daughter says, absolutely not. This is what he's been learning. We have this all set up. We've got other people who've already, booked plane tickets. It's going to be a very big bar mitzvah. Of course, this is before COVID, right? It's going to be a very big bar mitzvah. It's like another wedding. And no, I'm not doing that. And the mother presses her, and the daughter refuses. And the mother Susie is so upset and so angry that she tells me, I'm her case manager, that, that bracelet I have that we just got appraised by the insurance when we renewed my insurance, which by the way, appraised out to $50,000 US. I'm not giving it to her. She's disloyal. She doesn't have her priorities right. She's being inconsiderate. I'm going to give it to my caregiver. I'm going to give it to Mary, my Filipino caregiver. She's been so good to me. She's a wonderful person. She cares more about me than my children, okay? And she deserves it, and I'm going to give it to her for her birthday. Now, the only good part of this scenario is that Mary's birthday is a few months down the road. So I've got some time to try to change Susie's mind. As much as I try, and I try different venues, I take her out to lunch, I get her to know when she's in a good mood, I get her when she's in a bad mood, I try all sorts of strategies and approaches, and I'm a little bit handcuffed because I have confidentiality issues. When people confide things to me, whether it's the client or family members, I'm not, unless I get explicit permission, I cannot share that information. So I really don't know what to do. We're getting closer and closer to Mary's birthday. And I know that if that bracelet goes out of the family, this will be considered an unforgivable act. And the daughter will never get over it. And it's not so much even about the monetary value. I think it's more about the sentimental value. And it was promised to her. So I'm making no progress with Susie. I'm handcuffed. What do I do? What would you do? You can undo your mics if you'd like to weigh in here. What would you do? Kenneth, Collins, I think you said something, but I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. I see a lot of mute buttons on, and it's maybe because you don't have an answer either. Anybody?
What would you do? What did I unmuted?
Okay, I hear you, Rivka.
Oh, you do?
Now I do.
Yeah, well, I definitely would try to any way I could to convince her not to do that. Her daughter is of flesh and blood, and it's her grandson. And she owes her first loyalties to her family.
That argument was made.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what, Maybe ask her for the bracelet.
Hmm.
Let her give the bracelet to you, and then you can give it to the daughter afterward.
Why do you think she would do that? So why would she want to give it to me?
Because she probably loves you. You're like her care, you're as good as her caregiver.
So I will confess here, I actually entertained the idea of confiscating the bracelet, so this couldn't happen. But I legally can't do that. I ethically can't do that. Halakhically, I can't do that.
No, I thought maybe you could ask her, tell her that you'd love to have the bracelet, that she should give it to you, not that you should take it from her, but
Oh, you mean as a present? Give it to me instead. Oh, I see.
yes, yes.
Oh, I see. Mhm. Okay, that's one's possibility. I didn't even think of that one. That's an interesting one. I don't think she would have been open to that. It would have looked a little self-serving, Rivka.
It would have, but in the end, you would have been doing the right thing with it.
Mhm. Anybody else?
Knowing you, you
Speak
wouldn't.
with her. Did you speak with her about the meaning of promise? You said that the bracelet was promised.
Yes.
Did you have a conversation with her about what the word means and
Oh, yes.
the promise she made? So
Yes.
that didn't work either.
And her response to that was, until I give it to anybody, I can break my promises. I haven't transferred ownership of this. It's still mine. And as long as it's mine, I can do whatever I want. And I would have never thought that my daughter would betray me. She was using the word betrayed. This is a big thing to her. She felt betrayed.
Does the daughter have any other children besides the son being bar mitzvahed?
Yes.
Could she give that bracelet, like bypass her daughter and keep it in the family and give it to other like grandchildren?
We discussed that. We discussed that, but I was really uncomfortable even discussing it that far because I felt, because the promise had been made, and I was actually I had conversations with the daughter a couple times about the bracelet because she had borrowed it to wear at certain things. And that would have created other problems. But she wasn't budging. She was going to give hearing. Her mind was made up.
Has she told the daughter that she's not giving her the bracelet?
No.
Or is she keeping this to herself?
Good question. No, she wants her to find out. She said the only thing she regretted that she wouldn't be there to find out, to see her daughter's face when it was told she's not getting the bracelet. Like, she wants revenge.
Okay. Run out of suggestions.
No, can I just say that I feel that too much emphasis is on the bracelet and not enough on the relationship. And that's what's happening here. It's like I'm holding this over your head so that you can do what I want you to do. It's the relationship that is in trouble. And I think we should really not put so much emphasis on the bracelet and the value of the bracelet.
Of a friend, their wedding.
Who would tell the friend?
And
So,
yeah.
so the only thing is here is that we could have played that card if the daughter knew what her plans were, but the daughter didn't, and she didn't want her daughter to know. And I can't tell her because I have this confidentiality issue. So you're right, there's definitely a relationship issue here, but do keep in mind that for a long time, the relationship has actually been pretty good. Some normal mother-daughter stuff where the mother-daughters are going to disagree on things and have their little spats, but nothing major dysfunctional. This is really happening because the mother is starting to decline mentally. There's a cognitive impairment. She's no longer thinking rationally when it comes to things where she really wants her way.
Could something legal be done? In other words, if she gives the bracelet away to the caregiver, could the daughter then go and say that the mother was not competent in giving the caregiver the bracelet, and she really was intending to give it to her?
So there are two answers to that. First is, number one, her legal case would not have been strong enough because at the time her mother did it, she's still in the legal arena of being mentally competent to execute transactions. That's number one. Number two, by the time the daughter would have found out, the caregiver would have been back in the Philippines.
Wait, what?
She would have been back in the Philippines.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to have to, just in the interest of time, I like the responses. It's you guys are coming some things I didn't think of. It's good. Rabbi O, how would you weigh in on this?
Ken, thank you so much. So it is a fascinating sugya, and just to save time, I'll just say, from a halachic point of view, the question is, this mental situation, this mentally confident or not question of this person, halakhically, is she considered a shoteh or not? Meaning, is she somebody who lacks the consciences and control? Can she, halakhically? But I'm not going to look at it from that point of view at all. She might even be considered a choleh, someone who is sick. If she's considered somebody who is sick, the caregiver, the Philippine worker, is considered a caregiver by ethical laws, as well as from a halachic point of view. She's not allowed to really accept a gift, a present from the grandmother. From a halachic point of view, even if she wants to, even if the grandmother is happily giving over her this $50,000 bracelet, she's not allowed to. The caregiver is not allowed to accept it. So from a point of view of the actual transaction, the transaction from the grandmother to the caregiver, halachically, it's not binding. So even if she gives it over to her, from a halachic point of view, it's not considered the caregiver's at all. Even if she takes it home to the Cayman Islands, it's not considered hers, even if she takes it home with her, etc. And from the point of view of a choleh, from a point of view of this grandmother who was considered sick, it's the obligation of the children or you in this case to emphasize to the caregiver, to emphasize to her that she cannot accept this kind of a gift, which means that really the grandmother is stuck. She might want to take revenge and give it over to somebody else, but ethically she can't. She's unable to from a halachic point of view. That's from that point of view. From the question of whether or not the grandmother can also give it over from her own conscience, that's already a question that has to be defined from a halachic point of view. What level of a shoteh, what level of having a lack of consciousness or in control she has. That would be a question that would end up at a beit din, or end up whether or not the daughter decides to sue the grandmother or her mother, or to ask her where the bracelet is. So to summarize, again, in literally just a minute, to summarize, there cannot be a transaction. She cannot, the grandmother cannot give to the caregiver this bracelet. It's not halachically binding.
Okay, so the only thing I would question and what you're asking, is that gifts are commonly given to caregivers. This is a very common thing. Now, not $50,000 bracelets, granted. I haven't seen that one before, but certainly items of value, jewelry, things like this as acts of appreciation. Just say I found out that one of the caregivers received some beautiful linens, beautiful, gorgeous linens, stable linens from one of her clients. And so gift giving to caregivers, there's appreciation for what they're doing. It's a nice thing to do. It happens a lot. It's uncommon. The problem is by the time she would find out, she's back in the Philippines. So whether it's legal or not legal would be irrelevant at that point. So let me tell you what I did, okay? And keep in mind my boundaries. I'm dealing with a client from a legal standpoint is mentally competent. And because she's mentally competent, I am handcuffed. I cannot break her confidences. And one thing I just want to really point out, I have to really talk about this, because the minute my client doesn't trust me, I am finished. I become totally ineffective. My client must always have to trust me. And many times I have clients say to me, I trust you more than my own children. Okay. Whether that's honesty issues or it's just looking out for their best interest, whatever it is, or judgment, whatever it is, it happens a lot. And one of the reasons that happens is because I don't have the baggage with that client like they have with their own kids. And people, you know, like, they didn't raise me, the client didn't raise me. They didn't know what a lousy teenager I was, what a rotten kid I was. But with their kids, they have it. And that, you know, like those ghosts never quite go away sometimes. So it's a very interesting relationship. So I'm going to tell you what I am doing. I went to the caregiver. I went to Mary. Mary happens to be a very religious Catholic. I took her, she's a very honest woman. I took her aside, and because she's a caregiver and she is privy to a lot of confidential things, and because of her honesty, I took her aside. I said, I have a problem and I need you to help me. I said, Susie plans on giving you this bracelet. And I said, it's intended for her daughter. She had promised it to her daughter, but she's angry. And Mary knew the whole story about the bar mitzvah. She's been living it because she kind of was hearing it day and night from Susie. I said, and I've tried to talk her out of it because number one, it's a very expensive bracelet. And she says, yeah, I know. I just, you know, because she was there with the insurance, it's $50,000. I said, yeah. And I says, and number two, it belongs in the family. I said, if this goes outside the family and her daughter doesn't get it, it will create a rift that will never heal. I need your help. I need you to not accept this. And she said, she told me, she said, Miriam, I wouldn't take it. She was in shock. She was in absolute shock. And she was like, I know I would never do this. And I really believed her. She was being very, very sincere, very honest woman. What we ended up doing was we let Susie give it to Mary. And I told Mary, I says, Mary, once it's yours, you own it, you can do with it whatever you want. And you can give it to her daughter. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. So when her mother died, the daughter's mother, Mary kept it. Now, one of the fears, Mary said she didn't even want to have it in her possession because she didn't want anybody to think that she stole it. Very legitimate concern. So what we worked out was Susie, Mary wants you to keep this in your safe deposit box so she doesn't have to worry about it getting stolen or lost or anything. And that's what we did. And the only person who had the code to safe deposit box was me. And so the daughter got it. That's what happened.
Did the daughter know the story?
No. 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 There was no upside to telling her. There would be no upside. The mother's
right.
gone.
Right. I thought maybe the mother told her.
No. The mother died. The mother died thinking that she had pulled one off on her daughter. And that's okay. That's okay.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Did she go to the wedding or the bar mitzvah?
She went to the bar mitzvah. She went to the bar mitzvah. And it was very interesting, just to show you the cognitive impairment here. One of her arguments was that a wedding takes precedence over a bar mitzvah. That was her argument. I said, that's true, except for the fact that this happens to be your grandson. It's your grandson's bar mitzvah. That is a little bit different than your best friend's granddaughter, a little bit different status. And she couldn't get past that. She couldn't get past that.
Didn't you violate confidentiality by going to the caregiver?
No, because the caregiver is in a position where it is assumed she will be privy to a lot of things that go on in the home. And the caregivers, my God, they can talk. Stuff that goes on home. Huh?
Un bagel? Et c'est le bottom cette fois.
Okay, next case. Did we exhaust that? Does anybody agree or disagree with that decision?
It was a good decision, but you took a big chance.
I know. Sometimes you have to. Okay, next case.
Just one thing about what you just said, taking a chance. So when it comes to halacha, there's really no chance, because even if this caregiver wouldn't have accepted, the idea of giving it back and would have taken it to the Cayman Islands, halachically she can she can be sued from a halachic point of view, and she would have to give it back. Also, in Israel, the law is that a medical caregiver, a caregiver in general, is not allowed to take gifts that have value and conflict of interest when it comes to the family.
Who's going to sue her? Rabbi, who is going to sue her?
That's the thing.
Who's going to sue?
I'm just saying that when it comes to a situation like this, from a halachic point of view and from a legal point of view in Israel, doctors and caregivers are not allowed to take gifts that have value to it, at least something that is worth something, and also that have conflict of interest when it comes to families. That's the law in Israel as well.
I want to say one other thing too. There's another perspective here to keep in mind. There was only one person who had the code to that safe, and that was me. If that bracelet's not there when the mother dies, who's going to be looked at? If the mother gave that bracelet to the kid, that's right, it would be me. If she gave it to care. So I have a certain vested interest here to protect myself as well. So whoever asked the question about did I breach something by going to the caregiver, I would say if everything else is null and void from what I said, I think that alone, I do have an obligation to protect my reputation. That's everything in this business. It's everything. And I would have had no way of proving myself innocent because I was the only one who had the combination of that safe. Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. Okay, thank you for your input, everybody. Thank you. Okay, this is one that comes up every once in a while. I'm a medical case manager. Who pays my fee? My fee usually comes from the client themselves, but many times it doesn't. Many times it's the children, one or maybe all of them, who will pay my fee. Okay. Many times you get into a situation where the parent is saying, I don't need a medical case manager. They don't think they need a caregiver. They don't need a case manager. I'm fine. I can run my own life. I don't want anybody here controlling me. You know, I've made this far in life without anybody. And they have a very legitimate concern is that the minute they hire a caregiver or a case manager, that they're going to lose their independence. It's a very legitimate concern. And I personally am a very, very big advocate of giving a person as much independence as they could possibly handle, and even pushing them sometimes to their limit. I feel very strongly about that for a lot of reasons, but we're not going to get into it so much. So anyways, we get down to this and like, who pays the fee? So now, let's say it's the mother. Mother saying, I am not paying from my money for a case manager because I don't need her. And the kids are saying, we're exhausted. We can't handle all the things you need to do. And the truth is the kids are almost always right. The mother, the father, whoever it is, really needs a case manager, okay? And they just, because they have their own lives too, you know, they're juggling kids and their own grandkids sometimes and jobs, whatever. They can't handle all the things that have to be done in a case management situation. They also don't want to handle all the fights, the arguments that they're having with their parent over every little single thing. So they want somebody to, the buffer. A lot of times a case manager is the buffer. Okay, so in this case, the kids really can't afford, especially if you're only talking there's one or two children, they really can't afford the fee. And they really need to take it out of the mother's funds. And truth be told, since usually one of the kids is managing the money, watching the bank account, the mother will never know that it's really coming out of her funds. Is that an ethical thing to do? The mother's made it clear she doesn't want her money spent on that. And the kids are going behind her back, knowing she won't notice, and paying for the fee and getting it done. And probably telling their mother as well, don't worry, Mom, we're paying for it. Don't skin off your back. Is that ethical to do? Anybody? You can unmic yourself.
Children have access to the mother's account?
I'm sorry, who was that, Rivka? Yes, say it again, please.
The children all have access to the mother's account?
It varies from, usually it's one or two, because usually just because of geographic, some kids are living in America, some kids are here.
They have some of them have access.
Some do, yeah,
So the mother trusts them.
yes.
I think that it's a question of the mother's competence also. You know, it's borderline because that she may feel that she's very independent, but objectively she isn't very independent. So
Well, we're dealing here, you're right, it deals with, here we're dealing with somebody who's mild cognitively impaired. So she's still legally competent, but there are things that day to day that she really can't handle by herself. She really can't. And she makes mistakes and she puts herself at risk. And no, so, and this is a case where she really does need, I'll give you an example. What does a case manager usually do? You go to the doctors, you do all the doctor visits with your clients, because what happens with an MCI person, the minute they walk in the doctor's office, they forget why they're there. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't remember their history. There are a lot of things that they don't know what to advocate for themselves for. So, and they have 15 minutes usually most of these doctor visits, okay? So
isn't it considered an expense? In other words, like you would go ahead and pay for a cleaning lady or pay for a car service. Isn't it considered a legitimate expense that the children are willing to pay for the parent? And would that be considered a legitimate expense?
Out of the mother's funds or their own
Out of the mother's funds, out of the mother's funds.
So the kids have come to a point and said, this is a legitimate expense because we can't continue running with you to all your doctor's appointments, keeping track of your medications, going to the ATM machine to get you money, handling all your other legal things that have to be done. We don't have the time for it. We live too far away. We have other issues. We can't all do it. We just can't do it. Okay. So we need somebody to run interference here. Or, you know, we're having too many disagreements, Mom. We don't agree on things. Let's get a third party to come in and navigate this. Okay, be a buffer. Keep peace in the family. That's a big part of my job, by the way. I would say it's legitimate. Yeah, it's legitimate.
You mentioned that the mother said, I don't need a caregiver. I can do things on my own. I don't want to spend my money for a caregiver. I don't need one. And then the children say, okay, we're going to kind of go behind her back and pay for a caregiver. Would she accept the caregiver thinking that the children are paying for her? I'm sorry, the case manager?
So in many cases, yes. In many cases, yes. Yes. I had a case recently, a 96-year-old woman who refuses to forget about having a case manager. She didn't want a caregiver, 96 years old, on an oxygen tank. Okay. She's refusing, and her sons don't live here. So we had to be a little sneaky how we got that done. But it's a very specific case. It's not one of my cases. I actually turned that case over to one of my students, but for a number of reasons. But what would you do? Do you think it's ethical to use the mother's money behind her back?
I'd like to say, I think if the person is endangering their life in any way, then yes.
Definitely. If they're endangering life, there's nothing to question about. But let's say it's not. It's just the day-to-day stuff. They don't know how to advocate for themselves in a doctor. I mean, I'll give you one just very recently. The mother had an appointment with her psychiatrist, okay? And she got there and she forgot why she was there. She forgot what she had to talk about. Completely forgot. And it was a wasted visit. These visits aren't easy to come by if you're in a coupon going through coupon.
I mean, there might be some medical issues that if she's not able to express it, that could be endangering her life.
Potentially, yes, that's true. Anybody else have any solutions how to handle this?
Could a doctor convince her?
Yeah, could try, but they don't always listen. Again, remember the big factor is
Money, who's paying?
they want their independence.
I would like to say that when, I think when parents, when people get very old and they can't handle their funds, they have to trust their kids. And that's the end of it. They must trust their kids. If they can't trust their kids, who can they trust? So there normally is one child who's close to a parent who manages things close by. It's very unusual if there's no child around. If there's no child around, that's a very, very bad situation. And the parent needs to be near the child. That's the way that works, in my opinion. If a parent is totally cohesive and wants and still has the children managing the funds, then the parent can be part of it. Then the children can say, I can't give you 40 hours a week of my time. I need a helper to wash your personal laundry, to do your personal shopping. And please understand, mommy, that is the way it works, because otherwise I'm going to get sick. And they have to explain.
Danielle,
the head for it, then they managing her funds. That's the way it works. That's the way it'll be for us.
Danielle, you have to remember, you're not dealing with someone who is thinking correctly. They have MCI. They're not, their reality is different from yours.
Okay.
You have to go into their reality.
I'm saying
because they're not going to go into yours.
If the parents signed a health care and a what's it called? The healthcare proxy and the power of attorney, finito. I don't know what to say. I just think people have to trust their kids. Or somebody.
Okay, so you just brought up something. A durable power of attorney would be right. Would be a great tool. The thing is, the courts and any doctor if I know is going to say that can now kick in if they're only MCI. If they get down to moderately impaired, yes, but not MCI. They still have legal standing as a competent adult because they're only mild cognitively impaired. So that's the problem. That's why I say this is the most difficult range on that scale of 1 to 30, the most difficult one of clients to deal with. It's much easier to deal, the more incompetent they are, much easier it is to deal with everything. It's just so clear cut. We just do what we want to do. We feel is the right thing to do. We don't have to sit there and negotiate.
Somebody needs to talk to them.
Okay, Rabbi O, what would you do? What's the right thing?
Thank you. So again, I'm going to be speaking from a strictly halachic point of view. In my halachic opinion, it's completely unethical to go behind the mother's back and take her funds. There are a couple of sugyot in the Gemara, one specifically when it comes to kibud avayim. So for instance, if I have to pay for my parents' food and my mother and my parents, my father has money, can I use their money to pay for their food? The answer is yes. I'm allowed to, because food they need in order to live. The question that has to be asked here, how important is a medical case manager? Is it considered food, meaning without it, will they survive, or without it, will they not survive? So that's a question that has to be dealt with. Another question that has to be further understood is how important, meaning the level of her mental capacity here, as you mentioned before, from a legal point of view, maybe she's not considered problematic, but from a halachic point of view, she might be considered problematic. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, and that is it's unethical, because there is a sugya in halacha that talks about somebody who is about to die, pass away, like somebody who's very, very, very sick, and we need to buy medication or a very, very important surgery that has to be done. How much do we spend? How much do we spend on this person? Do we spend all of our money, half of our money? And even then, in that situation, if someone who says, I have the money, but I'm not interested in going through the surgery, but the surgery might save her life, even in that situation, even though halachically she must probably have the surgery, others have to pay for the surgery, and then they can sue her later on for the funds, but they cannot take the funds from her, because that, again, is unethical. And that's when it comes to saving a life. So here, in a specific case of a medical case manager, in my opinion, I don't think it's important enough to go behind the mother's back and take her funds. As hard as it is for the children, that's not what halacha would allow. Halachically, the children, if they want the medical case manager, then they have to figure out a way that they pay for it. They cannot take her funds. And if they can't manage it, then unfortunately, they won't be able to hire the medical case manager. And in Israel, there are other options besides going with a medical case manager. So therefore, in my opinion, halachically, it's unethical completely to take the funds from the mother.
Okay, so thank you. So one of the things that worked out very well where I had a client was hell-bent that she was not going to have a medical case manager, that she said she'd have one, but she's not going to pay for it. Okay. And by the way, there's a difference here between medical case manager and caregivers. Many times they'll agree to a caregiver to a certain level, but not the medical case manager. They're really sometimes, not all the time, are just afraid that all their decision-making is taken away from them, which is really not true, because what we try to do is empower them to make more decisions, just guide them and keep them focused. But anyway, so what do we end up doing? In one particular case, was very, very difficult. There are 3 children involved. The oldest one was in a better financial standing than the rest of them. But very understandably, he didn't want to foot the bill for this. This was going to be an expensive case management case because of what was involved. And so I suggested is, okay, you pay for it. You pay for it. You sit down with your siblings. You keep an accounting, which I will sign off on. And when your mother leaves this world, Mea Esrim, you are first in line to get the money back for everything you put out for case management. You get the money back. The day that happens, it comes when she is now legally, mentally incompetent, you can start taking it from her funds. But until then, you pay it, and it will come off everybody else's Yerusha, off your mother's estate. You get your money back first, okay, and you go from there. And that worked. It's still working to this day.
Very good solution. You run into these problems all the time, or it's rare?
All the time. There are some here that I don't think Rabbi Oat would allow me to talk about. They're that juicy.
I will do the next one without him.
Okay, do we have time for one more, or was it too tight? No more. Okay, Yolanda says no more. I thank everybody for your input. It was interesting. I hope you found it as equally interesting. And I would just sign off one piece of advice for everybody, and that one of the best ways to avoid a lot of these dilemmas is to address them way before they become possibilities of happening. And one way is through a durable power of attorney. If you don't have it, get it while you still can, because then others will be making decisions for you. And if it's a court, it's costly, and it can be decisions you would never want, nor would your children want. The durable power of attorney is an excellent tool that just came into being about, I think it's 2 years ago this month, actually. So use it. It solves a lot of problems. Everything from how you want to live your day-to-day life, where you want to live. Do you want to be in a Dir Mugan? Do you want to be at home? How you want to be dressed. My husband and I did it. We've got everything in there. I put on there like basic things, like what do I want? I want to be showered every day. I want to be dressed. I don't want to sit around my pajamas. I want my jewelry on, my makeup on. Okay, every day. So these are instructions. You can get very specific how you want to live your life. And then when it comes to assets, how you want them distributed and when and to whom. So that's also important. Okay, on that note, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very fascinating.
Thank you. Good night.
Write a book.
I can't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rabbi Ott, are you going to?
Just before you do, please, there is a question in the chat as how does one contact you or case managers?
Okay. Should I type it in or give it out? Type into chat. Okay. That's my, oh no, I did a typo there. Okay. I also have a website. Is that, I forgot how to type. What is that my website? I think it's jerusalemcasemanagement.com. I think that's it. I may have misspelled it. No, I did spell it right. Okay. It's jerusalemcasemanagement.com. Okay. You can call me.
jerusalemcasemanagement.com.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
I didn't catch the first.
I'm sorry?
I didn't catch the first word of your website.
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Are you a social worker, a nurse?
Medical case manager. It's like, it's a hybrid of a few things.
Can't be the website because this is .com. There must be an email address.
No, that's, you're not getting Jerusalem case management? Try it out, honey, please.
No, it's fine. Okay, Miriam, while you're doing that, is Rabbi Oates still online? Is Rabbi Oates
am.
there?
Oh, there he is. He moved.
Okay, Jerusalem.
Rabbi Oates, did you want to say a few final words?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll just say, first of all, thank you so much for this presentation. And of course, to Irene Grossman and to you, Ilana, for really putting together always fascinating presentations, fascinating lectures. It's so nice that our shul has so many different people coming in and giving us very interesting topics. It's really wonderful, wonderful to hear. And may we have more. Regarding tonight's, I'll just say that this whole topic of someone who is in distress, someone who's mentally in a downfall, someone who is a little older and cannot make their own decisions. From a halachic point of view, that person is considered someone who is sick, and someone who is sick, halacha will see that person and help that person as possible, as much as possible, like any person who is sick. Halacha does not differentiate between someone who is physically sick and somebody who is mentally sick. So therefore, it's so important to address these things. So thank you so much for tonight. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I wish everyone a continued wonderful week. Thank you, Mervin, also for putting together this wonderful Zoom.
Thank you.
Miriam, how many clients do you have at any one time? How much time can you give each person?
It depends on what they need. Everybody's different. Every time is different. I do have people that assist me. People I've trained, students that assist me in doing, whatever needs, wherever it's appropriate to be done. I'm sorry, what? Oh yeah. Oh, my husband's making a good point. This is why I married him. Is that when I take on a client, there's a ramp up period in the first 3 months, which are very intense because I have to get familiar with everything about that client. I'm going through medical records. I like to go back a minimum 5 years. I'm meeting with all their doctors. I'm meeting with all the family members. And depending on the family dynamic, every family member wants to get me alone privately to hear their side of the story. So there are all these things that have to be navigated, meeting their friends even, okay? Because this is all part of the picture. And usually in a case management relationship, it's usually a lifetime relationship. Not always, because sometimes it's a project, like a certain thing needs to be done, and then they don't need me anymore. I have a couple cases like this right now where, those cases will expire, not because the person expires, but because we accomplished the project that needed to be done. So I'm very careful who I take on. When I decide to take on a case, I first meet with the person in their home. I don't charge for it because I don't want to feel obligated. And it's usually a 2-hour meeting, 2 hours at least, sometimes 4. It can go as much as 4. I really want to see how they live, their environment, kind of just get a feel for it, because a lot of times when people call me, what they think they need is really not what they need, in terms of it. So we kind of like hash all that out, and then we decide, what's going to be involved.
What was the name of the cognitive test that you mentioned in the beginning?
MMSE, Mini Mental State Examination.
Thank you.
Also known as a Folstein test.
How many medical case managers would you say there are in Jerusalem who speak English?
You broke up. I didn't hear the full question. I'm sorry.
How many medical managers speak English? You feel there are in Jerusalem?
I still can't hear it. Anybody?
How many medical case officers
How many speak English? Gosh, I really don't know. To really answer your question fairly, there was no medical case manager per se in Israel until I started about 10 years ago. It's not a licensed or certified profession in Israel. My certification's from America. There was talk about getting it certified. Who knows? I don't know if I'll be alive by the time they do it. So it is becoming more popular now. It's much more needed because medical case managers can save the system a lot of money, and it saves the family a lot of money. A lot of times, a case manager, depending on the situation, the fee is actually paid for by what they're saving the family in terms of accessing benefits they never knew they could get.
Correct.
So it just, like I said, every situation is different. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, good night. Lila Tov.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.